Hello, my name is Bethany, and I am the Bibliophilic Witch. I apologize for the lighting. It's not as good as I would like, but it is a little snowy outside, so it's a little overcast. It isn't terrible, so I'm still going to film my video. So, I decided today that I wanted to do a Heralds of Valdemar discussion, which is a book series by Mercedes Lackey. It is going to be a long video because this series is long, which is saying something since overall, including all of the other series that Mercedes Lackey has written or co-written, she's written over 140 books. So I'm not talking about 140 books, but I'm still talking about a series that is pretty darn long. I have some apple cider to drink so that I can not be too parched, and I will also have kind of like a table of contents down below, so if you wanted to skip to any parts, you certainly can. So, a basic understanding of the Valdemar world. First of all, the series itself is huge, it's pretty massive, and you can start at any place that you want to because the way it's written is not like a direct sequence of books. There are trilogies and there are duologies, standalones, everything you can think of basically, and they take place at different times of the timeline of this world. And you can really pick it up at any point and not be very lost at all. People do recommend either starting with the first. People do recommend reading in publication order, or they will recommend in chronological order. Publication order tends to be the more recommended, and that's what I would recommend. If you reread the series, chronological is pretty fun, but for the first time through, I would recommend publication order. The world of Valdemar is actually a country, and then there are surrounding countries. We do go to a lot of other countries quite often, not necessarily all the time, but we do go to the other countries, whether the main characters from Valdemar are going as diplomats, if there is a war going on in the other countries, if our main character happens to come from one of the other countries, if our character from Valdemar is going on a quest, whatever the case may be, we do go to a lot of other countries. But our primary storyline is set in Valdemar. Valdemar is a country that it's a fairly peaceful country. I mean, there are constantly skirmishes along their border, particularly with a country called Karse, which has a very fanatical belief system. And with any religion, you're going to have people who are fanatical, and you're going to have people who are just regular people that just have a different belief system. But of course, it is a corrupt government that is run by power-hungry people who call themselves leaders of the religion, who aren't necessarily leaders of the religion at all. And so they're very messed up, and they are constantly fighting and hating on Valdemar, and they see the beings, the companions of Valdemar, and their heralds as white demons. And so we quite often have these fights going on. Now, the companions of Valdemar are horse-like creatures, or ethereal horse-like creatures, that are quite often hinted at being divine, but we never really get a definite answer. Like, it's just hinted at quite often. Sometimes the companions themselves say things that kind of hint at it, and you just kind of go, wait, what? But they never really confirm anything. And so it's a very interesting thought, and you constantly are getting more the more you read, and it's just a very interesting aspect, and I really enjoy that too. The companions will then choose an individual, and the individual can be a child. Most often they're younger, but they can also be adults. They can even be older adults, just anywhere on the spectrum. They do often pick these people, and they will choose people from outside of their country also. Like, we see all these dynamics, and it's very interesting to see all these different things. Primarily, though, they do choose children, and the children then get taken to the capital, which is Haven. In Haven, there is a college. It's called the Collegium, where these children are then taught basically basic law, geography, survival, and then other things. One of the main things that they get taught is how to use their gift, which is the magic system in this world. The heralds most often have gifts, which are usually like mental gifts. So there is like thought sensing and thought sending, and there is empathy, and you can send empathy or you can receive empathy. There is fetching, so you can either far-fetching or sending, I think. I don't quite remember that. There really hasn't been a main character with the fetching gift, but basically you can bring an item to you, or you can send an item away from you. It's like a teleporting an item, basically. There is also fire starting, and there is also foresight, so you see the future. So there's a lot of different gifts, and that's one of the things that is taught at the Collegium is how to use your gift. There is also a gift called the Mage gift, which is the ability to manipulate the magic in the world, which runs in basically ley lines and connects at nodes. But this is something that we don't always see in all the books, and as you read the books and you explore the world, the more you learn about the history of the Mage gift, and it's very interesting. I really like that aspect also. Like, there's so many things about this series that I just really enjoy. So that's a basic understanding of the world. Once the kid or the adult has finished learning what they need to know in order to be a herald, they become a full herald, and then they are seen as law enforcers, whether that is acting as a judge or roaming and settling disputes, or acting as a leader in battle and sending orders, whatever it might be. There are many different things, but they are basically the main runners of the world. People that are chosen by heralds are basically guaranteed, or by companions, are guaranteed to be fairly pure of heart. Like, they're not going to be terrible people, because companions, as being some kind of divine, are able to know that this person they're choosing is a good person. And so it is one of the laws that anyone that is within the royal family, in order to succeed, they must be chosen. So you have to be chosen. If you're the princess, you have to be chosen in order to become queen. If you're the prince, you have to be chosen. So you could be the first in line, the eldest royal child. You won't inherit if you are not chosen, but your younger sibling is chosen. So it's a great system to make sure that they do not have corrupt rulers. And then there's also the king's own or the queen's own herald, which is also a herald that is chosen by a more knowledgeable and even more world-weary companion. There's more to it than that, and you learn that in the first book, basically. But that companion chooses a herald, and that herald is basically the second-hand man or woman of the king or queen. So that's the basic gist of the world. It's very broken down with that description, and it might be more confusing than it was helpful, but I hope it does help you kind of get a good understanding of it. I love this world. It's one of my favorite worlds. Besides Hogwarts, this is the world that I would love to just escape to and hide in. And like, when I'm asked which magical world would you rather be in, it's either Hogwarts or it is in Valdemar. Like, yes. But also, if I'm in either of those worlds, please let me have the magic of that world. I want to be a witch if I'm in Hogwarts, and I really want to be a herald if I am in Valdemar. It'd be very disappointing to not get to be. So I'm basically going to talk about the books and the book series, the trilogies of the Heralds of Valdemar series in more or less publication order. Like I said before, it is kind of recommended to read them in publication order, but you can also read them in chronological order. That being said, I'm going to show you one of the newest books published in the series. This one does not show the list for the chronological order, but this one shows you the books published in the Valdemar world. Now, but from here down is not Valdemar, I believe, so long as I'm looking at this right. So there are a lot of books in the series, but you can kind of see the correct publication order in just one of the books. You can also read them in chronological order here. And it's funny because the most recently published one, I thought for sure it would have this chart in there. It does not. That was really interesting to me. But you can read it in either order. I am just going to talk about them in publication order because it just makes the most sense. Now, they're not going to be in the exact publication order because I don't have that perfectly memorized. I have a pretty good understanding of the correct publication order, but I get them confused. What can I say? Okay, so The first ever book that was published in the Heralds of Valdemar series was The Arrows of the Queen. This one was published in 1987, so this series is older than me, and that's kind of cool, to be perfectly honest. This one is the first of one of the trilogies. This trilogy is actually most often referred to as the Heralds of Valdemar trilogy because it was the first trilogy in the series, and probably at one point it was expected to be the only trilogy, so the only books in this world. This one specifically follows Talia, who is a Holderkin. A Holderkin is kind of a misogynistic culture where we have men who marry multiple women, and the women are kind of oppressed. And this in general, some of the women are very happy here, but we do not always have happy people in this system, and that would include our main character, Talia. Talia she's not typical. She's not seen as being normal because she likes to read. And while reading is still acceptable in the women and wives of the Holderkin, it is not seen as being respectable if you read legends or basically fiction. And that's what Talia likes to read. She likes to read about the Heralds of Valdemar because their legends fascinate her and their adventures are something that she would love to experience. And those are what she enjoys to read. And at the beginning of this book, she is going to be married off, and they're talking about having her marry a man who is known as being abusive, and it terrifies her, and she is very unhappy with it, and she runs away. But then she ends up being chosen, and the story goes from there. There is a lot more to this one specifically than I'm going to really say because you don't want to hear everything, but this is the first one. I would really recommend it because it is the first book that was ever written in this world, so it's a great place to start because you're being introduced just like everybody else was originally introduced, just as the author was introduced to this world when she first started writing it. So it's a good place to start. The first one, like I said, was Arrows of the Queen. This one I do not own the other two in, but they are Arrows Flight and Arrows Fall, so good series to read. After that is the last Herald-Mage. So this one is pulling in the Mage gift, like I was talking about earlier, and it's talking about why it doesn't always exist in all the worlds, because it doesn't always exist. It's very fascinating. So the first book is Herald's... Yes, I have this in the right order. The first book is Magic's Pawn. The second one is Magic's Promise. And the third one, which I do not own, is Magic's Price. So this one follows a young nobleman who is actually, he's not your stereotypical masculine individual, and he has more of a slight frame, and he is not the favorite of his father, even though I believe he is actually the eldest, and so he's supposed to be the one that inherits, but there are problems that abound, and he is actually gay, which is frowned upon in this society at this point in time at least, and so, yes, at least they're a further out noble family. They're not in the city. It's a little bit more accepted and normal within the city, but out where they're from, it's not. And so, yes. Daniel is one of the most powerful mages in history, and his story, partially because he's the last one, but partially because he is so powerful, his story is one of the more interesting stories, and that's why we get one, because it also explains a few things. This trilogy is one of those that's going to rip out your heart and stomp on it a few times, but it's really good. Honestly, though, a lot of Mercedes Lackey's Herald's books stomp on your heart quite frequently, and you will love it. You will love every minute of it. You're going to suffer, but you're going to love it. So then we have the Vows and Honor duology. The first one is the Oathbound. I do not have the second one, which is called Oathbreakers. This series, this duology, I have not actually read, so I don't know a lot about it, and I'm probably going to be incorrect when I talk about it. But I do know that there is one woman who she's a person of color. She is oath to her goddess. Her goddess demands celibacy from her, and she also has a sword that basically has a mind of its own, more or less, and it actually leads her to a lot of adventures and things and doing certain things, and it's very interesting. I really like it. She also travels with I believe the other woman is actually a herald. They might be in a relationship together. I can't quite remember. Don't quote me on that. I do know that there is this book, which is about one of the two ladies, her daughter or granddaughter, I'm pretty sure it's a granddaughter, who also has the sword, And she also is with another person, young man. Pretty sure it's a young man. 80s, gotta love it. A lot of people, this is their favorite. Either this one or this duology are their favorites within the Valdemar universe because they do have lesbians and they do have kick-ass lady main characters. So definitely worth reading. Okay, so make sure I have them in the right order. This is the Mage Winds trilogy. I have all three of them. The first one is Winds of Fate, the second one is Winds of Change, and the third one is Winds of Fury. Now, this series is following the Princess in Waiting of Valdemar, who actually ends up having the mage gift, but at this point in time, mages are not very well known. So she goes on a quest to learn how to use her gift, and it is also going to be an answer to a problem that they are facing in this point of the world, the timeline for Valdemar. So that's her story, and it's really good. Really good. We get to see a lot of other cultures in the Valdemar universe, so this series is really good for that main reason. And our main character is actually really cool because she is very strong, and she actually has dealt with a lot of character growth, because we saw her in the very first trilogy with Talia, and she was a bit of a brat in that series. So it's very enjoyable to read. I recommend it. Not specifically in publication order, but it makes sense to mention this one next anyways, is Take a Thief. This one follows Skiff, and Skiff is actually one of the main characters in the Mage Winds trilogy, so he's worth talking about now. He is a thief in his earlier life, and then he is chosen, which he doesn't think can possibly be right because he is a thief, but he ends up being able to use his abilities for good later on. So this is probably one of my favorite ones. If you really want just a taste, you're not really worried about reading any of the trilogies, you're not really sure if you want to dedicate time to starting out with that first book to see what it's about, I would recommend this one because it gives you a really good framework for what most of the books are like. It gives you a really good taste of the writing style for Mercedes Lackey, and it's just in general one of my favorites by her, so I recommend this one. Another standalone that we have is Brightly Burning, and this is one that this one really breaks your heart. It's really good. I have probably only read it the one time because every time I think about reading it, I don't feel like crying and bawling my eyes out, so I don't end up reading it, but it's very good. The main character is kind of put upon, but he is in a noble household, so you have that kind of, well, you have privilege, but so why is it so difficult for you? But then he ends up having fire starter abilities, and so things get a little out of hand because he's being bullied, and then he does end up getting chosen, and then him and his chosen end up being a part of the fight with the primary antagonistic country, Karse. Karse tends to be the country that you hear the most about because we hate Karse. Karse is horrible. And they end up being a part of that conflict, and they are a part of what resolves the conflict, and it is a heartbreaking resolution, but it is so good. If you want a standalone to just get a taste of it, this one would probably be a pretty good one because it's probably one of the most heartbreaking ones in the series, so you'll get that behind you, but you also get a really good feel for the world, a really good feel for the author's writing, and also just really enjoy a good story. Oh gosh, I still have far too many to go through. Then we have the Mage Wars series. And the Mage Wars series takes place before pretty much all of the other Heralds of Valdemar books. And this is really setting the tone of the worldview, but we don't have heralds or anything like that. That hasn't really happened. We have a lot of mages, and we have griffins, which is really fun too. I really like griffins, and the griffins in this series are really cool. I really enjoy them. So we have the Black Griffin, the White Griffin, and the Silver Griffin. Now the first two in this series are basically war novels. Nope, I lie. The first one is. The first one is dealing with the Mage Wars. I can't really say too much more than that. There isn't a lot. We have two main characters that we get to get the perspective of, and that is the Black Griffin on the cover here, and his friend, who is not on the cover. Skandrenon is the Griffin's name. Amberdrake is his really good friend, who is actually human. And he has an interesting job, which has some negative, like, is seen negatively outside of his culture. And his culture is really cool and would also be a really good reason for you to read this, because it deals with people of color, and it's just, it's well handled, and I love it. It also has creatures that are not necessarily human that are treated perfectly fine. Also, you can tell I read it and I loved it. So many, I love it. This one doesn't have quite as many. But this one takes place after the Mage Wars that have happened. Like, the whole series is called Mage Wars, which is confusing because the Mage War only really happens in the first one. But this one takes place after, and they have settled a new home after the Mage Wars have ended, and their home ends up being on country that is claimed by another people. And so they end up going as a contingent to the country to give themselves a good standing with these people. And so this one is still following Skandrenon and Amberdrake. That's actually who's on the cover here. And again, plenty of diversity and well handled, and it just really enjoyable. I think my favorite part, I really enjoy and appreciate the diversity, but my favorite part of these books is definitely the Griffins. I love the Griffins. Now, I have not actually read this one yet. Well, I haven't reread it. I read it a long time ago, so I couldn't tell you really what it's about. But this one takes place after their city has been well established and everything is fairly happy, and we have the child of Skandrenon and Amberdrake's child also. So these two end up being together, and they're working for the what's called Silver Griffins, which is kind of the law enforcement in their world, and they end up going out into the world and then being stranded. And so that's their story. I don't know much more than that about it than that. I started reading it when I was doing that read along a while ago, and I just did not finish it because I was so connected to the other characters that I just couldn't get into it. So then we have the Mage Storms trilogy, which is Storm Warning. I have a couple of hardcovers for these. Storm Warning, followed by Storm Rising, and then Storm Breaking. I have not read this series, but the main character pictured on the cover is from one of the other countries that surrounds Valdemar, and he ends up being, I'm pretty sure it's a he. He is chosen, and so the dynamics for a character outside of Valdemar being chosen is dealt with in this series, so it's very interesting. Like I said, I have not read this one. This is one I've literally never read. There's some that I've read, it's just been a really long time, so I don't remember. This one is, we go with Exile's Honor, and then Exile's Valor. This one is about Alberic, and Alberic is a Karsite. Karse is one of the other neighboring countries. I think I talked about this in the intro. I don't quite remember. Karse is, they're a very fanatical country, and the government is very corrupt, but like any religion where we have fanatical individuals, we do have people who are decent people. And Alberic is actually, he is, I think, a captain in the Karsite army, but he actually has a gift, and in this world the gifts are seen as evil magic, and so he is actually going to be burnt alive, even though his use has always been beneficial for the Karsite army. They are going to kill him because he is demon spawn, he's horrible. But he is rescued by a companion, and the companion then chooses him, though it takes a while for him to accept his choosing, because he is accepted and taken into Valdemar, which he has always been taught to hate, and he's always been told that it is filled with terrible people who are just horrible, and his whole worldview is turned upside down. The first book specifically is another one of my absolute favorites in the series, because it is just, it's such an interesting way to tell the story, and so it's just very enjoyable. I really like it. Really, really enjoyed it. And just for the interesting concept, I would really recommend these. Both of them. So this is the first book in the Collegium series. I only have the first one in physical format. This is an old library, large print copy. I don't like this one particularly. It does not get to be in front where you can see it on my bookshelf. It gets tucked behind, but at least I have a hard copy so I can pick it up whenever I want. My library has a really horrible tendency of not having physical copies of all of the books, so as many as I can actually have physical copies or my own copies that I can pick up at any time, the better, because then I don't have to wait for a request. So this one is following a main character who is an orphan who is raised in a mine, more or less. The owner of the mine is a horrible person who does not take care of the children that he has working the mines at all. He does a horrible job, and so these kids are terribly malnourished and they are treated terribly, and he abuses them in more ways than just not feeding them or clothing them properly. But just a tip of the iceberg. When Mage is chosen, he doesn't even know what heralds are, even though he lives right in the middle of Valdemar. He doesn't know what they are. He is taken to a guard outpost where they stop so that he can become more nourished, because he is so malnourished he can only eat soup. And so they take care of him and clothe him and bathe him and just make sure that he is more healthy and able to make the trip to the Collegium in Haven, where he then gets to go and he learns things, and he ends up being trained as a spy. And the Collegium series primarily deals with him learning about his family history and discovering things, so it's interesting. Normally most of Mercedes Lackey books are trilogies. This one is either 4 or 5 books. I can't quite remember right now. And after the 3rd book, I kept finishing each one and going, that can't be all, because I thought that was going to be the last one, and it wasn't. I did not know how many books was going to be in that series within the series, so I was constantly confused. What is going on? I'm so confused. After the Collegium Chronicles, there is the Herald-Spy series, which is closer to home and then closer to the heart. And these books are directly after that because they are following Mage as an adult and his friends as adults. So I don't know too much about this. I just know that it follows Mage, and I really liked Mage and his story, so I'm happy for more. So I bought these just this last fall, and I cannot wait to read them. I haven't read them for random reasons, but they'll happen. It'll happen soon because I'm very excited. It would be the last series in chronological order, and that is this is Darian's story is what this trilogy is called, and it takes place after the events of the Mage Winds series, and interesting things have happened to Valdemar, so I don't necessarily recommend reading this one out of order because you'll be more confused. I read this one out of order. I'm about 90% sure I read these after I read an anthology. I'm pretty sure that's the order I read the Valdemar books in. I did not read them in any specific order, so I really could not tell you. But the first book is Owl Flight, the second book is Owl Sight, and the last one is called Owl Night, Night with a K. And in this world, this point of time, we have Darian, whose village is destroyed, and he ends up going into the woods that his village was beside, and he is adopted into the Hawk Brothers clan. Hawk Brothers are a very interesting culture, and I really love the culture that we get in that. And I loved the aspect of the Hawk Brothers in the series. It was one of my favorite things. This is one that I read in junior high, and I really don't remember much about it. I just remember really enjoying it, and they're quite a bit more different than the rest of the series, so we don't have any heralds in this series that I'm aware of, but I really enjoyed them. That's pretty much it for my Heralds of Valdemar discussion. I do have anthologies. I have 4 anthologies. There are probably more like 6 anthologies that are out there, and I recommend these because they're a great way to just have an opportunity to explore and not have to really be too dedicated, and just gives you a really good taste. And there are a lot of different stories in them. Sometimes they are dealing with noble families, that don't have any magic. Sometimes they're talking about a herald, sometimes they're talking about a herald that is being chosen, sometimes it's a herald that is learning things. It's a great experience to read one of these because you get a really nice taste of all the different things happening in the Valdemar universe. So great place to start. That is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please like it. If you would like more videos, please subscribe. I will post every video on Tuesday. Thank you. Bye.